Hey guys, Merps here, coming at you with a video that has nothing to do with gameplay at all. I have a PowerPoint presentation. Ooh, sexy, I know. But what I wanted to do in this video is talk about sort of the discussions that we're having recently within the arena community and what I perceive as kind of a lack of cohesiveness in our communication. And I'd like to address that. So, this is called criticizing the criticism, why we conflate certain issues and argue past each other. And I wanted to make this because I saw that this post came up recently where our podcast from yesterday was posted. And as of right now, the top comment by Suicidal Zebra says, realistically, there's no system Blizzard can put into place that high-level players will be entirely happy with. Even a well-defined floating bucket system based on a rigorously developed tier list with iterative and agile micro-adjustment following top 1,000 player pick rates could be picked apart, especially at the extremes. And I wanted to address it because this right now is the highest upvoted comment. So I think a lot of people share this view. And certainly I've seen this viewpoint being brought up during the podcast and after the podcast as well. I want to specify I have nothing against Suicidal Zebra. I think it's a very well-written response. But I did want to address this because reading this, I think that an argument like this kind of misses the point. So here's why. I think what we are seeing is what I want to call the conflation issue. And we use words like satisfaction, improvement, happiness with the game, etc., etc. And I think a lot of people end up conflating or merging, tying together separate factors or issues that are related but not the same. And what ends up happening is it just ends up causing confusion. And I think it makes everyone's criticisms, my criticisms, and also the community's responses to my criticisms, weaker due to an overall lower level of understanding. I think we kind of talk past each other. So I want to present how I see things. And truly, when I criticize and when I present my views, how I think they should be viewed. So I think there are three separate factors in play here. And I'll describe them, but I want to use these terms so that I can keep referring back to them. So it's imperfections, contentment, and love. All right. So let's talk about imperfections. Imperfections are things related to the game that you think should be improved. Throughout the span of Hearthstone, this has been card balance, right? Giggling Inventor. UI issues, how pretty things are, how sort of accessible things are from the menu, arena rewards, and the bucket system, which we are talking about recently. Now, I think a lot of people would agree that some imperfections are more egregious than others. If one person's complaint is a card is too shiny or not shiny enough, I think we can all agree that, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge deal. So, it is objectively true that there will always be imperfections. I want to say this right off the bat. People will always complain about things, right? People will always complain about things, whether they are big or small. But I do want to emphasize, and I'll get to this a little bit later, that there is a difference between all of these. Okay, so let's talk about contentment. We can also categorize contentment as faith in the developers, company, game, whatever you want to call it, right? The question you want to ask for this is, how satisfied are you with the game state currently and the progress being made? And this is very different. And I want to say that it's not necessarily tied to imperfections, although obviously one impacts the other. Because there can be many imperfections to a game, but you can still be very content with it. And I want to bring the example of Risk of Rain 2. You guys may have heard me talk about this recently. It's a game that I've been playing a lot, and I think it's really fun. This is the perfect example of a game in which there are huge amounts of imperfections still. If you want to be specific, I think the teleporter not going any faster, no matter how fast you beat the enemies, that's an imperfection. I think the fact that all classes play the same past the first hour mark, that's an imperfection. Anyways, don't want to bore you guys. However, even though there are huge imperfections, not just many imperfections, like the imperfections that they have are significant. I still have a very high contentment level. I still have a lot of faith in the game and the developers, even though they have those imperfections. And that comes from the communications, sort of the history and the body of work that they have done, and how I see them working on it. So, it is very possible for there to be many imperfections and significant imperfections, but for someone to still have contentment in the game. I think that's important. Now let's get to the third one, which is love. The question you want to ask for this factor is, at the end of the day, how much do you like this game? I love Hearthstone Arena. If I didn't, I wouldn't be making tier lists. I wouldn't be making this video about the game. It's just something I really, really enjoy. And part of it comes from something intangible that you can't really put your finger on. And I think it's not too different than other kinds of love. For example, a lot of people have a child that is very disobedient, but they still love them, right? You ask them, it's like on a day-to-day level, does this child annoy you, frustrate you, tire you? Yes, but you love it. Same thing with the tough love father, right? You get annoyed at them, you think they are unfair, you don't like how they discipline you, but at the end of the day, you love them. So I wanted to address this because love is very different than contentment as well, because you can be very low on contentment. You can have very little faith, but you can still love something. So one of the things I see so often is, and this holds true for a lot of game criticisms, if you complain so much, just leave and stop playing, right? It's like, if you play, don't complain. But if you do complain, it's like, well, just don't play then. And I think this is a very dangerous argument to make, because essentially what it does is it conflates contentment and love of the game, it also conflates those two things with the substantiveness and quantity of the improvements. The imperfections. So at this point, where I personally stand is, I love Hearthstone, but I think that there are egregious imperfections, and I have very low contentment. I have very low faith based on how things are going, right? And I think it's important to sort of separate all of these things, because I think too often we do conflate either two of these or all three of them together. So, what is the real issue here, right? Really, truly, what is the issue? Let's go back to this. Let's go back to the Reddit post where this argument, there's no system Blizzard can put into place that high-level players will be entirely happy with. Even a well-defined floating bucket system based on a rigorously developed tier list with iterative and agile micro-adjustment following top 1,000 player pick rates could be picked apart, especially at the extremes. So, let's break this down, right? It is true that there are always going to be imperfections. However, I find it untrue that this system that is being described, right, if we actually have a rigorously, this system based on a rigorously developed tier list with iterative and agile microadjustment, following top 1,000 player pick rates, I would be happy with that. That would raise a significant amount of my contentment. And so what that would do is that would still create imperfections, but less substantive imperfections. It would raise my contentment dramatically. So I think that is one of the issues here. A lot of people are seeing the fact that there will always be imperfections with the fact that contentment will always be low. And that's just not true at all. Just because imperfections will always exist, it doesn't mean my contentment will always be low, right? And I use once again Risk of Rain as that example. Huge amounts of imperfections and substantive imperfections in that game, but my contentment for that game and my faith in that game is extraordinarily high. But that could always change, right? Just like how these things can always change. People make the argument that because imperfections will never change, as in there will always be imperfections. And once again, that's a faulty sort of equivocation there as well. They believe that contentment will always be low if you always see imperfections, and that's not true. And lastly, I want to express the fact that love is completely separate from these two. You can actually have love for a game that you identify as having significant imperfections and a low contentment for, just because you love the game. And that's where I'm at. So at the end of the day, my love for Arena will pretty much stay the same. No matter what they do, right? It's like, okay, they take the buckets away or they keep having the buckets. Almost no matter what they do, my love for the Arena will pretty much stay the same. And I think that's confusing for a lot of people as well, because they're like, Merps, you don't seem to like the game currently and where it's going, and you keep on complaining about it, so why do you play? I hear that a lot too. And I'm hoping that this video explains that, addresses these sort of counter arguments that I see being made. And I want to reiterate, I think the comment that Suicidal Zebra made is very well written, and I think it's a legitimate point that is being made over and over again. But I do want us to communicate clearly. I want you guys to understand whenever I express my views exactly what I'm thinking, and I want us to altogether avoid this issue of really just merging these things together, because when we do that, I think we just talk past each other. I don't think communication is as effective. Anyways, guys, hopefully this video made sense. Hopefully this video helped. Let me know what you think about it. I do think that the Arena community is a great place. I think that we help each other a lot, and I think we all want the game to succeed. So, all right. Thanks, guys. See ya.